The 1 second. No, wrong one. There we go. All right, get that up, get a full screen here. All right, when we were doing the presentations last week, a couple questions came up and I want to take us through some things regarding the low block area and the situation with a player who's out of bounds, whether they're airborne or not. So in the tackle box situation, right now, normal formation, this is what your tackle box is going to look like. We go 5 yards to each side here. Now, the NCAA rule is 5 yards from the center or where the snap is. The IFAF rule is 5 yards from the center of the line, which most of the time, and whether we want to say 99 or 99.9% of the time, that's going to be identical. But you do get exceptions in the IFAF situation where the center of the line could be way off from this situation. And I'm going to show you a couple examples. We showed you last week that per the player who's the left end here with the red arrow has an eligible number on and everything else. By NCAA rule, he is in the tackle box and he's not restricted on the low block. By the IFAF rule, the center of the line is not where the quarterback is behind the center. The center of the line here is there's actually 8 players on the line of scrimmage here. And that is going to put the center of the line over here by this number 70 or 78, whatever it is here, where we have the yellow line through. And if you go 5 yards left, 5 yards right, those are the people who are in the tackle box or in the free blocking zone. So they are the ones that are able to block low. The people outside of that, they'd be restricted. So that's a difference there. Now, in talking with Jim, we will be looking at the IFAF changing this next year to going back to the center where the ball is snapped from versus the center of the line. So we're hoping for that. But again, not a big deal from the standpoint that 99 plus times it's not going to matter with the formations that you have. All right. Now, the other one we talked about was what's an airborne player? And we had this play, and it came from the semifinals of the NCAA, where this player off the ground, I'm going to go back a little bit here, there we go. Where this player is ending up going out of bounds. Where do we spot the ball? We're across the sideline or at the spot that he's still in bounds with his left hand as he progress to the spot, even though the ball is over the sideline. NCAA considers this an airborne player. IFAF does not consider this an airborne player because he has his left hand down in bounds. Now, you got to have the greatest eyes in the history of the game as an official on the field to make this call. And you're not going to have probably the replay technology that they had in this game. So you just give it your best shot. But technically by rule for IFAF, the left hand is down in bounds. The forward progress of the ball is where that orange line is going up past the player's number. So just some points there regarding that with blocking below the waist and the airborne player. All right, I'm going to give it back to you, sir. Unless we got some questions. Anything you want to add to it, Jim?
No, I think you've covered the main thing there. The defined point of forward progress for that guy crossing the sideline is where the ball is at the instant some part of him touches the ground out of bounds. So I think the first part of him that comes down is his knee. So technically, and as you say, it's probably only with replay that you can determine this very, very accurately. Technically, the forward progress is where the ball is when his knee touches the ground.
Okay, Jim, I have a question that's been asked about it. Why can we not change it now via a bulletin? The centre lineman.
Well, there's two reasons for that. One is I think we're right and NCAA are wrong. And secondly, we have we have people playing to IFAF rules in all corners of the world. If NCAA wants to issue a statement or a bulletin or an interpretation or something like that, Steve Shaw can be pretty sure that within 24 or 48 hours, every official who's playing to those rules will have heard about it. We can't expect our communication mechanisms, even in the days of the internet, to work that quickly. And we have translation efforts to think about and all sorts of things like that. So we're not in the game of making mid-season adjustments.
Okay, fine. There's no further questions on there. So okay. So thanks for that, Bill. We'll hand over to Jim now, who's going to go through, give an overview of the new mechanics of football officiating. Over to you, Jim.
Okay. Well, let me just wait while my screen rearranges itself, as it always seems to do whenever I share my screen. But yeah, thanks everyone for coming along today. And what I want to do is just quickly go through all the mechanics changes. So sorry, my mouse isn't working. Right, so the new mechanics manual came out last month, and as usual, we identify changes or significant changes in blue. If you've got a coloured copy, sadly they don't appear very clearly if you print the manual out in black and white, but sometimes you can discern a different shade of grey. Now, the major changes all have a box around them. And there are 22 major changes, and I've counted all the minor changes, and there's 470 of those. But the other way in which you can tell whether something has changed or not is that every change has a change mark, one of those symbols that you see listed there next to it, which gives you an idea of why we've changed it. I think the most common symbols that appear are the one for clarification of existing mechanic when we realize that something isn't explained as well as it might be. The second most common one is probably fill the gap in the existing mechanics. So the mechanic's okay, but perhaps there's a particular situation where that mechanic needs to be treated in a certain way, or interpreted a certain way, or applied in a certain way. And those sort of changes reflect that. And this year, in fact, I think really for the last two editions, we've also introduced a lot of changes for better communication. Now that we've got radios, that more frequently that referees will have microphones that link them to the crowd and to broadcast media, we have to step up our game in terms of how we communicate with those audiences. So I'll go through the significant changes. and probably the most significant change from an officiating mechanics point of view is one that won't affect us in the context of what we're talking about here, because at IFAF level, we're normally working 7- and 8-man crews, but we've made an important change to the mechanics on 4, 5, and 6C crews. So that's the one where you've got a centre judge rather than 2 deep officials. And it reflects that in recent years, we've seen a lot of examples of officials getting themselves into trouble by trying to move downfield when they've read pass. You know, the offensive line goes back, so they read pass. So now they start drifting downfield. But if they drift too far, or there isn't a pass, then they can really be in trouble if the play comes towards them. So what we're saying is, you know, we recognize that at our level, most passes are probably incomplete. Many more passes are short. And if there's a long pass, the way our quarterbacks tend to throw the ball leaves the ball in the air for a goodly time. And that gives the officials the opportunity to move closer to the point where the pass is going to come down. So the new mechanic is for the wing officials to stay on the line of scrimmage until they're confident a pass is going to be thrown that crosses the neutral zone, and then move into a position so you can see the end of that pass. And as we always say, if you can sidestep and keep yourself facing the field, that's the best way to go. Appreciate that sometimes you have to turn in order to be able to move faster to move downfield. But you know, do what's necessary there. The important thing is not getting ahead of the intended receiver, because that then puts you in a dangerous position. So the net effect of this is that 4 and 5 man wing officials are going to be more like a crew of 7 and 8 wing officials. The other thing that's relevant here, it's not in the wing officials chapter of the mechanics manual. It's not particularly linked to any size of crew. I think you find it in somewhere in chapter 5, the general principles section. And that is that we want people to try and make sure that when the pass arrives, all the officials observing it have their heads still. If you've got your head still, you will be able to see the play more clearly. If you're running around and your head's bobbing around like this, your brain will have more difficulty in processing the image. So I don't know if you've noticed that NFL officials over the last couple of seasons, when the pass comes down, they're usually stationary. They've got themselves into a position. They're no longer desperate to stay ahead of the play. They've realized that actually getting a clear view of the play with the head stationary is a good idea. And actually, the wheel has gone full circle on this, because I remember, you know, in my early years as an official, back in the 1980s, this was what we were taught then, that, you know, get yourself into position, but as the ball comes down, stop and look at the play. And I think everyone has now realized that that was a good thing to do. Okay, let's move on. There are a few tweaks to the duties of centre judges on field goal attempts. And the first one is on an 8-man crew. For some reason, I'm not quite sure why, we had the centre judge in a different position from the referee. and that was putting them too close to the kicker and holder. If the snap was bad and went over the holder's head, or things like that, then the centre judge was too close. So we simply tweaked the initial positioning so that the centre judge should mirror the position of the referee and be out a bit wider. But a bigger change is on a 6C crew, where previously I think we said that as on a 5-man crew, the line judge would go under the posts with the back judge. But what we're now saying is, let's put the centre judge behind the goalposts. We did some experiments with this. We found it was relatively easy for the centre judge to get, you can spot the ball and then just keep going to the press box side goalpost. And the number of yards that you have to travel is often less than the number of yards the line judge would have to travel to get there. Somebody suggested that we should still have the line judge under the post, but move the centre judge out into the line judge position. But then that's just moving 2 people, and that doubles the chances of something going wrong. So it works. We've tried it out, and putting the centre judge under the post is a good mechanic. Still, if it's a really long attempt, which we define to where the snap is from outside B's 20-yard line, then the mechanic in both crews of 5 and crews of 6C is for the back judge to do the 1 judge mechanic. So in those circumstances, the centre judge would stay in the backfield opposite the referee. Okay, we've tweaked the positioning of the deep officials on goal line plays. So if you're the back judge on a crew of 7 or 8, previously we said if the snap was outside the 25, you start on the goal line. If the snap's inside the 15, you start on the end line. If the snap was between the 25 and the 15, the previous mechanic had the back judge start on the goal line. And that often put them too close. It certainly put them on in many situations, put them on the same line as the field judge and the side judge. And so we had 3 officials doing a job that 2 could do. But equally, going to the end line puts you an awful long way away from the play. So what we're saying now is start off in the end zone at a comfortable distance, keeping out of the way of the players, but then react to the play. So if it turns into a running play or a short pass and the goal line is the important line, then move up to that and help out the deep officials who are there. If there's going to be a pass into the end zone, certainly if there's going to be a pass deepish into the end zone, then move back to the end line. So it's just about putting back judges in a slightly safer initial position and then trusting them to be able to read the play right. And then someone pointed out that the wording for the position of the field judge and side judge on goal line plays was be on the sideline. Well, of course, that's nonsense. We want all officials to be, all the wings and deep wings to be outside the sideline at all times. So we've reworded that. We made a couple of changes to the way in which penalty enforcement is done. We're always conscious that we need to do things as a crew to make sure we get the penalty enforcement right, and we're always looking for the best way to set up checks and balances to make sure that if a mistake is made, someone on the crew spots it and raises it as an issue and gets it put right. So we're going back to the previous practice of having the line judge hold the line of enforcement. There's a couple of exceptions to that. Line judges aren't generally involved in penalty enforcement that's at the previous spot on free kicks, so that doesn't apply. And it's also very difficult for the line judge to be in two places at once if they're on a crew of 4 or a crew of 5, they're deep to cover the end of the kick, either a punt on a 4-man crew or a field goal on a 5-person crew. But every other time we want the line judge to be at the enforcement spot. And we also want to emphasize that checking penalty enforcement is an important duty for everyone on the crew. And it is more important than covering flags. It's more important than talking to coaches, all those sorts of things that sometimes we find that officials are doing instead of checking that the penalty enforcement is correct. So the other part of it is about confirming details of the penalty enforcement verbally. And we suggest that this is a duty that can be done by the umpire, the centre judge, or the line judge. So we don't yet know whether it's most appropriate for the official who is marching off the penalty to do this, or when you've got both an umpire and a centre judge, for one to do the marching and one to do the making the verbal statement. And we've also considered whether the line judge would be the best person to do it, given that they're at the enforcement spot, or they're parallel with the enforcement spot. So what we want somebody to say is something like, we're going 10 yards from the 36-yard line to the 26-yard line. Then everybody knows what the distance is, everybody knows what the enforcement spot is, everybody knows what the succeeding spot will be. And hopefully, whether it's the umpire or the centre judge carrying the ball, they can go straight to that yard line, straight to that spot, and put the ball down. And they don't have to count their steps. They don't have to step on every hash mark on the way. They just go to the succeeding spot and put the ball down. Similarly, if we've got half distance enforcement, then we would say that. Now, again, we haven't done enough experimentation with this to know whether the better way of doing it is to do it by voice or by radio. But certainly we do know it's a bad idea to do it at exactly the same time as the referee is about to start their announcement. So you either have to do it before that or you have to do it after. I think doing it before the referee does his announcement is much preferred, because it'll speed things up. But don't throw the referee off his announcement, certainly not by saying something over the radio that he can hear. And then a final thing about penalty enforcement: this isn't about checking, this is about what is obvious and not obvious. We've had some guidance in the mechanics manual for a number of years now about whether it's obvious whether a team would want to accept or decline a penalty. What we're saying is that you can apply the same principle to the aspects of penalty enforcement that are about the clock. So if you remember that the team that's in the lead will always want to consume time, the team that's trailing will always want to conserve time. 99 times out of 100, that will tell you what the option that the offended team will take. So, wasting a lot of time, either by the referee going over and asking the coach, which I've seen, or by the referee asking the wing official to go over and talk to the coach, which, as I've said, is not as important as covering the enforcement spot. That all takes time. So if in the majority of situations we can take it that the clock option is obvious, that will get the game moving a lot quicker. We've tweaked a couple of things to do with the coin toss and pre-game duties. We're conscious that around the world, some competitions have a minimum number of players, by which we mean squad members in uniform, and in some cases, a minimum number of coaches must be at the game, otherwise the game can't be played. Now, that should be a matter that the two teams can sort out for themselves, but we know that at the end of the day, when it's marginal, or someone reliable needs to do the counting, that's going to fall on the officials. In Britain, they're going to introduce a rule in our leagues this season that for an 11-a-side game, there have to be a minimum of 22 players and 3 coaches. And, if you've got a team where there's obviously hundreds of them on the sideline, you don't have to count that there's 22 of them. If there's only 10 of them on the sideline, you don't have to count it. It's obvious that they're not going to make the rule. But if there might be 21 of them, or there might be 22, that's the only occasion where the officials really need to get involved. We standardized a couple of aspects of the coin toss ceremony. So I think we've always said to referees to do this, but we hadn't actually written it in the MOFO. So when you're doing the coin toss ceremony, normally turn on your what we call public radio. So that's the stadium or broadcast microphone that you have, and that's distinct from crew radio, what Americans call O2O, official to official. So turn on your public radio so that the crowd and perhaps the people watching on TV can hear what goes on through the coin toss ceremony. Now, sometimes things go wrong, and so that might be a time to switch the microphone off until you sort things out, but then turn it back on and explain to people what has happened. And then the other procedure that we want to standardize is where you have a VIP at the coin toss. Again, we've seen slight variations of this, but the usual one is where the VIP sticks with the referee. So on a crew of 7 or 8, they go out with the referee to the middle of the field and stand between the referee and the umpire, so that they're in a good position that the referee can hand them the coin to toss. When you're doing the coin toss announcements, you should acknowledge them, say who they are. Those of you who've been in IFAF officiating for a while might appreciate the story about the mayor of From. I think only Frank Rasmussen knows where From really is, but yeah, that's a point to referees to make sure that you get the name of the VIP correct. So if that means you have to write it down on your game data card and look at it as you're saying it, then so be it. But we want to give them that sort of acknowledgement. Of course, you don't have to do that if the public address announcer has identified them. And then just a reminder, I think we've added this to the pre-game conference chapter of the MOFO. Remember to test your radios and remember to liaise with the video judge during the pre-game conference if you've got those things. A couple of things that we want to do to reduce the number of mistakes that might happen at the end of a period. So we want to be consistent in our communication of the timing. So if we don't have a visible game clock, but the referee does have a public radio, then the referee should announce the time remaining every time the clock stops after the 2 minutes in each half. Again, that's something that most referees with microphones will do, but we want to make sure that everybody does it under those circumstances. And then something we see screwed up far more often than it should, even in international games, is that when the chains get moved at the end of the first and third quarters, they don't end up in the right place. And often that's because some members of the crew are in too much hurry to do things and they don't do the job thoroughly. So what we're saying is that the referee, umpire, centre judge if there is one, head linesman and side judge if there is one, shouldn't be moving from the yard line of the succeeding spot until you've all checked that you've written the correct information down about the down and distance, the yard line, for the officials in the middle of the field, the lateral position of the ball, all sorts of things like that. Write that down and then move. And if you jog to the subsequent position, it won't take as long as if you don't stop to write those things down and then walk to the position. So we've got a couple of things related to rule interpretations. So we've clarified what was there partially before about what constitutes flagrant unsportsmanlike conduct. So of course, flagrant personal fouls are defined in the rule book, but flagrant unsportsmanlike conduct isn't. So that needs something in chapter 3 of the MOFO. So we'd already said that spitting at an opponent or an official should require disqualification. And also that if abusive language is aggravated, by which we mean, for example, that it has a racial or sexual orientation aspect to it, anything that makes the comments worse than they would normally be, that should lead to a disqualification. But we've also clarified that if the unsportsmanlike is extreme, however you want to define that, then that would make it flagrant. And also, it's more likely to be the case that a particular comment or action is flagrant if it's directed at an official than if it's directed at a player. That's a good rule of thumb in deciding. So we're not laying down the law. We're not saying, we're not providing a list of phrases that if a player utters are going to automatically get him disqualified. We want you to use your judgment. But what we're providing here is some guidelines, which we hope will make the application of that judgment more consistent across the world. And somebody raised the issue that there are 3 rules that talk about a player striking an opponent, and how do you decide which of those 3 rules applies? If you see a player striking an opponent. And I think this is relatively straightforward, but it's worth clarifying that if they do it as part of live ball action, then that's probably a personal foul. If they do it as part of dead ball action, it's probably unsportsmanlike conduct. And if it's more serious, if it's prolonged, if it goes on, if it involves multiple players, if it involves retaliation by the opponent and things like that, then that is the level at which we want to call it fighting. So we've always had this chapter in the MOFO about uncertainty. And I think we need to up our game about how we manage when in doubt situations. Too many officials are saying, well, I'm not sure whether it was targeting or not, but the rule says when in doubt, it is targeting. So I'm going to disqualify this player. And we want things to be held to a much higher standard than that. So first of all, if you're in doubt, if you don't know the full details of the situation, make an attempt to get yourself better informed. So that might be by adjusting position. It might be by talking to fellow officials and seeing what they saw. Watching the reaction of the players might tell you, you know, if the receiver is walking back to the line of scrimmage, that probably means he thinks that the pass was incomplete. You know, the player's body language often tells you things that you might not otherwise know for certain. And we want the degree of certainty and uncertainty to be proportionate to the action, and particularly the consequences of that action. So the example I've put here is about targeting. You know, to disqualify a player for targeting, you know, that rules him out for the rest of the game, and in a lot of jurisdictions for the next game as well. We don't want to do that unless we've got a reasonable confidence that targeting did in fact happen. So I think having a language to use to quantify uncertainty is a good idea. And what I've incorporated here is actually something that the British government used during the COVID pandemic. So they were getting a lot of advice from scientific advisors, from doctors and scientists. And they came up with this standardized way of talking about how likely something was to happen. And this picture at the bottom is reproduced from all those British government documents. So you can see there the sort of terms that can be used and how likely that reflects on a 0 to 100% scale. A couple of things about video review. This came up again, has come up as we get more and more experience of video review. We encounter situations that we didn't anticipate, and they come up as problems during a game, and we want to make sure we've got a machinery to resolve them if they happen again. So what came up in some games where I was the video judge last year was that sometimes there was confusion as to whether I was communicating a decision that I'd made based on the video evidence, or whether I was asking for further information. So what we're going to do here is use some key phrases. So if you start what you're going to say with one of these phrases, people will recognize it for what it is. Now, we already had one phrase, stop the game, but we've added some more. So some are for the video judge to say what they can see on the video. Some of them are about the video judge asking officials on the field what they saw. Then there are two that reflect that a decision has been made. So when the video judge says, I have made my decision, that means there is clear video evidence to either confirm or overturn the call, or to leave it, or the video judge has decided that the call will stand as it goes on the field. But also in IFAF video rules, we allow there to be a discussion in the situation where the video evidence isn't conclusive, but the video evidence can help the officials on the field, and the officials on the field can help the video judge to all work together to come to an agreed, a consensus decision. So I believe we have a consensus would be what the video judge said in that situation. And then the other thing to communicate is what the details of the next play, the down distance, yard line, and so on and so forth. That will come after the video judge says the next play will be. So those key phrases cue everybody in so they know the status of what is being said. And then a few other changes, a new when in doubt. We've changed the existing when in doubt on whether it's a pass or a fumble when the quarterback typically is hit as he's about to release the ball or has just released the ball. If he's been hit from his blind side, or you see an empty hand going forward, then when in doubt, rule it a fumble. In other situations, rule it a pass. And, you know, based on experience, quarterbacks who are hit on the blind side and have hands empty when they go forward have probably fumbled the ball, because that's what replay tends to show in those circumstances. And then a few years ago, the rule was introduced about feet first slides. It can sometimes be difficult to get the forward progress spot on a feet first slide because it takes you a second to realize that the ball carrier is sliding. So again, through looking at lots of plays like this on video, we can tell that usually where he started the slide was about 2 yards back from where he first touched the ground. So if you've got a foot first slide and you're not sure where it started, go back 2 yards from the point that he touched the ground and mark and give him his forward progress there. And then just to clarify something, if the clock has to start on the ready for play and there isn't, the 40-second clock hasn't already started, then the referee should give a combination of the ready for play signal and then wind the clock. We've added some new points of emphasis. The first 3 of those are about mechanics changes that I've already talked about, but the 4th one is about speeding up free kicks. Again, we see an awful lot of video where there is an awfully long delay between the try being completed and the next kickoff. So we want officials to jog to their free kick positions. We want the umpire to hand the ball to the kicker or leave it near the spot. Don't stand around holding the ball for a long time. Once the all the officials are in position, the umpire can signal to the referee, and the referee can then declare the ball ready for play. And if the kicking team haven't got the ball set up on the tee, if the kicker hasn't finished lining himself up with the ball, that doesn't matter. He's got 25 seconds to do all those things, but we're not going to give him extra time to do that sort of stuff. Let's get it on. And then something that isn't a mechanics change, and it isn't completely new because we did publish this as a mechanics supplement a couple of years ago. David Parsons was responsible for I think clarifying all our thinking about hurry up situations. So we've added some new stuff in the section on tempo. We identify what we mean by hurry up plays. Emphasize that the umpire or the centre judge, if you've got one, whichever's nearest, in a hurry up situation, they've got to go and fetch the ball. If the clock is running, they've got to go and fetch the ball wherever it is, bring it back to the inbounds lines and spot it. And we saw an example of a play last week. I can't remember whether it was Bill or Alex showed one where the officials had done a ball relay that got really screwed up. They shouldn't have done that. The umpire, the centre judge, should have got the ball and kept it in their hands until they put it at the succeeding spot. And then everybody else on the crew has to be aware of the situation and get into position for the next down. So, wings don't pinch in excessively. Also be aware of teams asking for timeout requests. Also anticipate what sort of play team A might run next. Is it going to be a pass? Are they going to spike the ball? Are they going to throw a pass to the sideline so a receiver can get out of bounds? Are they going to rush the field goal team onto the field? All those sort of things you can anticipate by using your football smarts. And then there are things when they go wrong in this situation, it's more likely to be things like formation fouls, teams not being set for 1 second and therefore committing an illegal shift, substitution problems, particularly from team B if they're trying to substitute when team A is trying to hurry up. A player might be so desperate to stop his quarterback being sacked that he is more likely to hold in these situations. All sorts of things like that we need to be aware of. And that's all from me, Davey. And have we got some questions?
I think there's probably one of the questions about running to the kickoff spot and the umpire leaving the ball at the spot, Jim. We normally ask the umpire to stand between the ball and the kicker.
Yeah.
So it sounded as if you want the ball to the foot of the ground and the umpire to go to the kickoff spot. But
well, I think if the ball's ready for play, you don't have to be between the ball and the kicker. So, the umpire can retire gracefully from having left the ball at the spot and leave it to the kicker. And once the referees declared the ball ready for play, we can get on with things. Yeah,
fine. I think that was the only really just about half of it when the umpire's giving umpire signals to the referee that we're ready, and you want the umpire to do that while the ball's on the ground.
Yeah.
Okay. Right. Okay. Well, thanks very much, Jim. That was the only question.
Pleasure.
So, we'll stop the recording.